What's up, War Fiends? Today, I'm going to bring you an episode that I've been poring over for months. I'm going to show you how to math hammer using the Cho method.
Are you seriously calling it the Cho method?
It's a Chobanian method.
Oh my god!
This guy. I've been playing Warhammer since I was 11 years old, but since the beginning, it's been the math that's drawn me in. I became obsessed with creating a standard predictive method that I could calculate in my head, and it's been crazy useful. To date, though, I've never seen anybody else using anything close to it, which blows my mind because it's so simple. So now I'm going to share it with y'all. This is only part 1, and it focuses on predicting the outcome of the attack sequence, and it can account for any special rules. Part 2 will be forthcoming, and will focus on the maths of other aspects of the game. For those of you new to the channel, my name is Blake, and I've been teaching math and physics for 20 years at this point. Normally, the channel focuses on my probability calculator and simulating attacks between units, but today, we're going to learn about the maths, and it's going to be super easy. Probably mostly. So without further ado, let's go ahead and give it a go.
How to Mathhammer.
How to math hammer.
All right, let's see what you got here.
So the basics of the attack sequence. If you want to get an attack through, well, you got a bunch of dice, your attacks, and you need them to successfully hit and successfully wound, and you need your opponent to fail their save, and you need them to, if they have them, fail their feel no pains.
And I assume attacks there should be number of attacks?
Yeah, this is number of attacks.
Gotcha.
You got it.
Hey, look at that annotation. Fancy.
So the thing that's important about this is all of these were ands. You need things to do something and something else and something else, which means these are all independent events. So what happens in one step does not necessarily affect what happens in the other steps. So if you want to know the proportion that are both going to hit and wound, you just need to know the proportion that hit and multiply that by the proportion that wound, and you'll get your result. So technically, it doesn't matter what order you do them in. You could find the proportion of saves times the proportion of wounds, times your damage, times the proportion of feel no pains, times your attacks, times the proportion of hits if you want.
Because they're all multiplication, they all exist on the M of please excuse my dear Aunt Sally.
You got it. So essentially, it's the commutative property of Warhammer dice rolling.
The commutative property of Warhammer dice rolling. I love that. That's perfect.
And we're going to leverage that fact because I feel like one of the problems that a lot of people have is they always do this sequence from left to right. Turns out, if you fudge that around a little bit, you can actually make your math a lot easier.
Yeah, because you're going to end up with a lot of wacko fractions that way. But if you do it in reverse, you might be able to guide it towards comparatively simple fractions.
And we can deal with things like skipping rolls more efficiently. The other thing I just want you guys to keep in mind, I tend to use fractions a lot. I really like fractions because they're really precise. But if you don't like fractions, you can always use decimals. So just keep in mind, like if you need something to succeed on a 2+, you've got an 83% chance of success, or the proportion of success is 0.83.
Which is 5/6.
Which is 5/6.
Perfect, yeah.
If something succeeds on a 3-up, you got a 67% chance, or 0.67. 4-up, 0.5, half. 5-up, 0.33, or a third. And 6-up, 0.17, or 1/6. And of course, the problem with decimals is I've had to round most of these. So they're not perfectly precise, which is why I like the fractions.
You've had to round all of them except for the 4.
Yeah, except for this one. That one's not rounded. The rest of these are accurate to within, within 100th.
Yeah, no, I think that's adequate for this. It's not, nobody's informing their decisions based on what's happening in 1,000th place.
Yeah, especially with random variables like this.
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
All right, so let's start with a simple example. This is an example that I assume that a lot of people can do because there's no special rules involved. So I just wanted to walk you guys through this real quick. Let's say we got a squad of intercessors.
So to clarify, we're actually just going to use an example. You're going to use an example here and walk us through your method. And that's rather than a step-by-step of how you do it, you're just going to show us.
For this one, yes.
Okay.
Because this is the simple case. In fact, in this simple case, you probably don't need to use my method, but I just want to get you guys up to speed with how this works, because if you can already calculate this, then when you compare it to my method, it just becomes easier to understand.
So this should give us our bearings.
Yeah, this should give us the bearings. Yeah.
Cool.
So here's the way I do it. First of all, we got 20 shots. And then I like to do this little diagram.
Why are they shooting at orc boys? I feel like you're... Never mind. It's fine. Let's do it.
All right, so I like to make these little tables. Here's my hit table. Here's my wound table. Here's my save table. And then they're going to be 1 damage apiece. So for reasons that aren't entirely clear at this point, I'm going to go ahead and fill these tables out in reverse.
Okay.
All right. So let's say we're saving on 5s. Your opponent is saving on 5s. Then if they roll a 6, you get nothing. They roll a 5, you get nothing. But if they roll anything less than that, you get 1 roll through the saves.
Okay.
Right? So in this case, we would have 4 out of the possible 6. So 4/6 of your dice are going to pass the save gate.
Mm-hmm. So, and you're calculating here for success. So this is from the perspective of the attacker.
The attacker. Yeah. Again, you can reduce this if you want. And that's 2/3, but it's not really necessary.
Okay.
Do the same with the wounds. We are wounding on 5s, which means 1 gets you nothing, 2 gets you nothing, 3 gets you nothing, 4 gets you nothing, 5 gets you 1 wound through, 6 gets you 1 wound through. So that's 2 out of the possible 6. And again, if you want to reduce the fraction, you totally can, but it's not really necessary.
Okay.
And then for our hit roll, hitting on 3s, so 1s and 2s get nothing. The rest get us 1. So we got 4 that go through out of the possible 6, or 2/3. So now, to calculate my expected damage, I'm just going to multiply attacks by proportion of hits, proportion of wounds, proportion of saves, and damage.
Okay.
So, again, just to be really clear, my expected damage is just 20 times 2/3 times 1/3 times 2/3 times 1. So the quick way I do this in my calculator.
Why is the time 1? Oh, because it's a 1 damage weapon. Got it.
So you can skip the ones if you want. I'm just trying to be thorough. So I would just put this in my calculator as 20 times 2 divided by 3 times 1 divided by 3 times 2 divided by 3 times 1.
Do you want me to do that for you right now?
Yes, please.
Okay, so say it back. I got 20.
20
times
2
times 2
divided by 3
divided by 3
times 1
times 1
divided by 3
divided by 3
times 2
times 2
divided by 3
divided by 3
times 1.
That seems unnecessary.
Well, the ones are unnecessary, but, just for completeness. If you want to skip them, you totally can.
I got 2.96.
So you can expect to get 2.96 damage through on average.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty simple when you look at it that way.
Totally. And again, when I'm doing this, I oftentimes don't make these little tables. I'll try and make the tables in my head, but it can be really useful, especially in the more complicated cases, because sometimes there's some things to keep track of.
And remind me, when you're multiplying fractions, you can effectively multiply the numerators by each other and multiply the denominators by each other.
Totally.
So if I were doing this on the fly, rather than looking at it that way, I might be like 2 times 1 times 2. That's 4 on the top. And 3 times 3 times 3. That's 9 on the bottom. So I'd simplify those. That's totally what I meant. No, plus, son of a gun. This is why I did bad.
Yeah. You can use
yes, 27, 3 to the third. So you got 4 27s.
Well, oftentimes if I had students that didn't like fractions very much, I would just tell them to do all multiplications first. So just 20 times 2 times 1 times 2 times 1 divided by 3 divided by 3 divided by 3. Doesn't matter the order you work in.
Yeah, because that 20 is a 20 over 1, and that 1 is a 1 over 1.
You got it.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Okay. I like it. I would have loved to have been in your math class. I'm just letting you know.
Well, today you get the chance.
That's a good point. Actually, I have for quite a while now. I am privileged.
So as we're working through this, what I really want you guys to pay attention to is these middle columns right here. This is essentially the meat of this entire process. These essentially allow us to figure out what are the numbers that we have to multiply together to get our expected damage in the end.
So in the end, we're just going to end up multiplying 5 terms together to get our answer.
You got it.
The first and the last are easy. They're just attacks and damage. But those middle ones we're going to determine by making these little columns.
You got it.
And
again, there might be a 6 number if there's a feel no pain, but that's less common and also less complicated.
Yeah, that's simple.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm ready for that. Let's give it a go.
Let's give it a go. So this is a simple example, but a lot of the cases that you're going to face in the game are a lot more complicated than this. So before we can apply some of those special rules, I want to walk us through going backwards through this sequence so that we can talk about how we're going to apply each of these special rules to this use case.
Well, let me clarify. So all the special rules are going to affect the calculation, but before we do another calculation, you want to show us how the special rules affect it, and then we'll do another one.
And how we're going to account for them, yes.
Got it. Okay, cool.
Cool. So what I have here is I've got the same diagram I had before in terms of the entire attack sequence, but underneath I included all the special rules that are listed in the game.
Okay, and how they're going to affect the way we do our calculation.
Yeah, so like the things that affect the number of attacks, you got Blast, which gives you an extra attack per 5 models in the unit. Rapid Fire, which gives you extra shots if you're within half range. I'm not really going to worry about those too much. That's why they're in blue.
Yeah, because you just add them.
Right. I feel pretty comfortable with that. I think a lot of people feel comfortable with that. In the hit stage, we've got Heavy, which could just be a +1 to hit. I'm assuming you guys are comfortable with that. We've got Torrent, which means you auto hit. Reroll hits, you get to reroll all the ones you miss. Reroll ones to hit. Reroll the ones that you missed.
I think that's fairly forthcoming.
Lethal hits are interesting because they allow you to skip the wound roll.
Mm-hmm.
Sustained gives you an extra hit on a critical hit.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is technically the word conversion in there as a special rule, but as far as I know, that's only applied to Votan.
Really? Oh, because conversion beam?
Yeah, I've never seen another weapon that has conversion on it.
That is an available weapon on the Decimator, although that's in Legends now. That can have a conversion beam cannon.
Well, either way, the conversion is really just like a special version of critical hits on whatever, which just means instead of crits on 6, you might get crits on 5s, or in the case of conversion, 4s.
Oh, okay. I think I might have been misunderstanding. You're using critical on X. Your conversion is a term you're using to describe anti-whatever on whatever.
Well, anti applies to the wound roll. So there's actually, weirdly, there's no special term for crit hit on X. So I see things that give things crit hit on X.
Okay, yeah,
I
that
feel
is
like
not on the
it's
Decimator.
weird that they did not include a special keyword for that, except for in the case of Votan for conversion. But effectively, you can think of this as just anti-whatever, but for the hit roll instead.
Okay,
Yeah.
Weird. I've never seen that in use.
I've definitely seen it.
Well, I guess I've probably seen it in use from Joseph, but anyway, whatever.
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Okay.
All right. And then on the wound roll, the special rules you got to worry about are Lance or +1 to wound, which are basically the same, but Lance is just if you charge, you get +1 to wound.
Right.
Basically, it's the same as Heavy, but for wounds instead.
Okay.
We got Twin Linked, which is the same as reroll hits, but it's reroll wounds. We got reroll ones to wound, works the same way here. We have Devastating Wounds, which...
Similar to lethals.
Yeah, if you get a crit, you get to skip the save roll. So it's essentially just lethals for wounds instead. Yeah. And the anti-keyword, which is just critical wounds on whatever instead of critical hits on whatever. And it generally applies to a particular class.
Right.
Yeah.
Like your stupid anti-infantry 2+ Banshees that I hate so much.
You got it. Other special rules we got to worry about for save rolls or for the save gate. We've got Ignore Cover as an invulnerable save. I'm not going to talk about these extensively because I feel like they're a little bit obvious.
Yeah.
On the damage roll, we have things like Melta or -1 damage or half damage.
And some of these are things that are they reference details that are not even going to be evident in these calculations. Like how far away you are from the orc boys is not something we're laying out in the hypothetical.
Yeah, but I mean, you could, but if it just adds 3 to your attack, you just add 3 to your attack number. So
right. But what I mean is all these ones that you said are fairly simple are things that you would need to look at the battlefield to assess and decide are relevant. So I feel like are not relevant. It can't really be involved in this anyway.
Yeah, totally. And then for Feel No Pains, I don't think there are any special rules that apply to Feel No Pains.
Okay.
So when we're doing this, we're going to focus mostly on these ones in pink because I think these are the ones that sometimes give people trouble.
Those are the ones that have a little bit of a math juggling for people, whereas the other one, +1. Okay, I got this. Totally. I'm a genius.
Now, the reason I use this method, the reason I'm doing this way is because of these 2 rules. Because of lethals and devastating, because they allow you to skip rolls, I like to do these things in reverse. Because if we do it in reverse, then we don't have to worry about a case where, if you get a 6, then you get to skip the save roll, right? Which means you have to say, all right, well, 1/6 of the time, this is the outcome. Then I'm going to add it to 5/6 of the time, this is the outcome. And the problem is that using all the traditional methods going left to right, like if you had a critical, if you had devastating wounds, for instance, you'd have to be like, all right, well, 1/6 of the time something happens. And 5/6 of the time, this other thing happens. And the problem is right here. It's that now you have a plus sign in this term, which means you can't just multiply stuff together anymore.
You have to do it in the right order now.
Right. Now order matters. And this is really annoying, especially for mental calculations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we're going to go from the end of the sequence backwards for this reason. And I think this will become more clear as we go.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, I just wanted to remind you all that we got a merch shop which got some pretty sweet stuff in it, including a Jake the Unclean One t-shirt and the brand new Rowboat Girly Man t-shirt that Dano designed. The Rowboat Girly Man t-shirt is perfect for roasting your Ultramarine friends. Please buy one. So we're going to start at the end of that sequence. We're going to talk about feel no pains really quick. So if something has like a 5-up feel no pain, right? That means they're going to be saving on 5s and 6s. So if I were to make my feel no pain table.
Which means there's going to be an extra column, supposing we were to reuse the columnar approach.
Yeah. So if they had a feel no pain of 5-up, well then 2/3 of your attacks, sorry, I should be using 6. 4/6 of your attacks are going to go through, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to make sure we all understand this concept of the complement, which is if 2/6 of them are being saved,
then 4/6 are.
Then 4/6 of them are not. Right. So like,
depending on whether you're trying to calculate measuring successes or you're calculating measuring failures, your fractions may be complements of one another.
So just make sure you can go back and forth between these two. The easy way I usually think of it is if I have a number like 2/6 and I want to know what's the complement, I just think, all right, what do I have to add to this top number to get to the bottom number? 4.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So we'll move past that. I just wanted to make sure we were comfortable with this whole complement idea.
I hate complements.
Because it matters for feel no pains and it matters for saves. For damage, I wanted to say something really quick because we need to figure out how to account for places where we have D6, mostly in damage and attacks. Right. So do you know what the average of a D6 is?
3.5?
Yeah, it's 3.5. You know what the average of a D2 or a D3 is?
2?
Yeah, it's 2. A lot of people know these two numbers, but I just wanted to generalize really quick because whenever you have a dice, like if you have, I don't know, let's say we had an 8-sided dice, right? Well, then you've got a sequence on the side, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all evenly spaced by 1, right? So if I want to find the midpoint of this, all I have to do is just look at the average of the first and the last number, right?
The average of the first and the last would, give you the same mean.
Yeah, because they're all equally spaced around the middle, so I could just like cancel the ones on the end until I find the middle, right?
Right.
But if you wanted to calculate this really quick, the first number on a dice is always 1. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So then that means the expectation value of a dice is always the average of 1 and the biggest side.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to know the average value for a dice, it's just going to be the number of sides plus 1 divided by 2.
Interesting.
Yeah, so for a D6, it's just 7 divided by 2, or 3/2.
I mean, this is something I knew and utilized, but seeing it in a little formula like that, I don't know. It's kind of sexy.
It's not super important
sexy.
It's not super important for Warhammer in its rule set right now because we don't have a bunch of weird dice sides. One that's really fun is D20s, just because I know they come up in D&D a lot. So, a lot of people think the average is 10.
It's 10.5.
It's 10.5 because then the average is going to be 20 plus 1 divided by 2, which is 10.5.
Right. Because there's no 0 on the dice.
Because there's no 0 on the dice. If you've got a weird dice that is not, that the values are not spaced evenly, then you can't use this trick.
Yes. Well, that's a very bizarre dice.
The other thing I want to mention is in the damage roll, we have to worry about things like half damage or -1 damage or melta, which is just like a plus X damage.
Mm-hmm.
I've messed this up a couple of times. So just remember, these follow PEMDAS rules. And luckily there's no parentheses, exponents, or multiplication. So it's really just DOS rules.
DOS rules.
Yes.
Fantastic.
So I just wanted to point that out because that's the way I remember it. Just follow PEMDAS. You don't have to worry about the last 3. So do your divisions, and if there are multiplications somewhere that I don't know about, and then add and subtract. Moving on to the save roll, just remember to use the complement, because if something's saving on a 3-up, then you're succeeding on a 1 or a 2. So just keep that in mind. I'm not going to talk too much about AP and invulns, but make sure you're applying them. But I did really quickly want to make this little table to just show you how effective AP is. Because if something is saving on a 6, then your AP1 essentially gives you an extra 20% damage. If something is saving on a 5, then each of your points of AP, well, up to 2, I guess, give you an extra 25% damage through. Right? So really the point that I want to make here is AP becomes more and more valuable as your save gets better. Because an AP -1 on something that saves on a 2-up, you're doubling your damage output.
Basically, the inverse observation that Armor of Contempt is best on a 2-up save.
And also armor penetration is best on a 2-up save. So
yes.
So anything that modifies the save is going to be increasingly important the better that save roll is already.
Right.
On the wound roll, I'm assuming we don't have to talk to most people in our audience about how to calculate a wound roll based on strength and toughness. I just went ahead and included the table really fast in case people were not familiar with it.
This is still more mise en place before we do a much more complicated example.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we're just looking at
AP is just going to give you a standard percentage buff to your blah, blah, blah. All right. Yeah.
But in terms of rerolls, something I wanted to point out. Again, here's the same table we had before, where if you're hitting on a 6, then you have a 16.6% chance of success. If you can re-roll ones, then you end up with a 19.4% chance of success. If you fully get to re-roll, then you get a 30.6% chance of success. So I just wanted to make this table really quick so that people could see essentially how much re-rolls has an impact. So over here, for instance, you can see that like if you're hitting on 6s, but you're re-rolling everything, that's almost as good as hitting on 5s. On the other hand, if you are hitting on 5s and you get full re-rolls, that's better than hitting on 4s.
That's almost hitting on 3s.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
yeah.
Not quite, but
on the other hand, if you are already hitting on 2s, then re-rolling hits of 1 and re-rolling all hits is exactly the same because re-rolling ones to hit is re-rolls.
Right.
But the thing that's interesting about this is all of these re-roll ones from here to here, this is just 16% higher.
Every time.
16% higher, 16% higher. Weirdly, this is 16% higher. This is 2 times 16% higher. This is 3 times 16% higher.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So what this is telling us is every single time you re-roll a value on a dice, that's giving you another 16.6% increase in damage. So if you were re-rolling all of your hits, but you're re-rolling 4 values, that gives you an increase of 4 times 16%.
So if I'm re-rolling 1s, 2s, and 3s, then I'm re-rolling 16% times 3, which ends up being 50%.
So you get a 50% boost.
Interesting. So the number of dice value faces that you are going to get to re-roll times 16% is how big of a benefit you should expect in your ultimate outcome.
Yeah, you got it.
Wow, that's cool. That's nice extremely useful and very simple.
Gives 16.6% buff. Well, that's really important because the classic way to do this is to say, all right, if I'm hitting on 4s and I'm re-rolling everything, then half the time I get a success. And then the other half the time I'm going to be half successful. So you end up with a plus. If you don't do that and you use this concept instead, this becomes a simple multiplicative operation.
Yeah, you can literally do it just at the very end.
Exactly.
Once you know what it is, you're like, oh, I get to re-roll my 1s here. So I'm just going to add 16% damage.
And that's exactly what I wanted to get at here. So we talked a little bit about re-rolls. I want to walk you through the process of actually incorporating this into your calculations. And then I'm going to give you a really simple formula for exactly how you're going to account for the proportion of successes whenever you're using these re-rolls. So let's go ahead and do an example of these rerolls. Let's see what happens if we have a weapon that's hitting on 5s and we have rerolls. So let's go ahead and construct the first part of this table. So we're going to go ahead and make our hit, wound, and save columns really fast. Hit, wound, save. I know we were just talking about wounds, but it doesn't actually make a difference if we're rerolling hits or wounds. They work exactly the same.
Okay.
So we don't care about our save column. That doesn't really matter. We don't really care about our wound column now that I'm thinking about it. So I guess I'm just putting that there so you don't get lost. All right. So we're hitting on 5s. So 1, 1. Our other 4 values give us nothing, which means we're going to hit 2/6 of the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So really brief aside, here is how we would deal with this traditionally. Traditionally, you would say, all right, well then 1/3 of the time, we're going to get the value of 1, right? Again, you could say 2/6 if you wanted. Actually, that's going to be easier. 2/6 of the time, you get the value of 1. And then for the rest of this, that's 4/6 of the time, we're going to get this value of 2/6. Right?
So you're doing it in one step. You're saying 4/6 of the time when you re-roll it, they will be worth 2/6 also.
Because that's our re-rolls.
Got it.
Right. So this is what you can expect initially, and that applies 2/6 of the time because that's when you got your hits. And then the other 4/6 of the time, you're going to re-roll it and get that value again.
And each of those re-rolls has the same 2 out of 6 chance of succeeding again. So it's your proportion of things that will be re-rolled times whatever your success rate is, as it always was.
Yeah. But the thing that sucks here is we have a plus sign in here. We don't want that plus sign in here because that means we can't just multiply a bunch of stuff together.
Which is kind of the goal.
Yeah. So there's actually a math way to turn a sum into a product. And that's by factoring.
Oh, I remember that.
So we're just going to factor out our 2/6. And what's left is, well, we got rid of that. So we have 1 here. We got rid of that. So we got 4/6 here. Right? And then, well, 1 is just the same as 6/6, right?
Okay. So now we got a common denominator.
So this turns into 2/6 times 6 plus 4 over 6. The reason this is important is because this is our original odds, our original probability here. And this right here, this number is always just going to be the number of faces that you re-rolled. So we can generalize this and we can say, all right, so your probability with a re-roll is now just going to be your original odds. That's this number.
So that's an O.
That's an O. Wait. Okay, there you go.
Looks like a baby with a curly.
It's like yeah, okay. Yeah, it's a O with a curly Q on it. And then here we just have 6 plus the number of sides you re-rolled divided by 6.
Yeah, it looks a lot more like theta. Isn't theta that?
Theta?
No, what's the sigma? What's the, like an angle? An unknown angle is often given the Greek letter that looks exactly like that.
Yeah, that's my theta.
All right.
That's true. So all we have to do then is instead of 2/6, well, we actually already have the 2/6. So we're just going to multiply this by 6 plus the number of faces we re-rolled, which is 4, divided by 6.
So now you're plugging in the rest of that equation up there where you'd previously rewritten the odds.
Exactly. So then the proportion of hits that go through is just going to be 2/6 times 10/6. Ta-da. Before we push our pencils any further, comment for the comment gods!
And for the throne too!
Yeah, the likes for the like throne thing. That thing. So the other thing I want to talk about in the wound roll was devastating wounds.
Okay.
So devastating wounds allow you to skip a roll, right? So let's imagine we have a situation where we are wounding on, what do you want to wound on?
3s.
All right, wounding on 3s, and you have dev wounds, right? Well, in order to calculate this, we also care about the save roll, because the save roll is going to impact how valuable this devastating wound is, right? What do you want something to save on for our example?
2s.
All right. Actually, that makes a lot of sense, because then you're really going to want your devastating wounds. All right, so here's how we deal with this. So we're going to have our tables. So here's our hit chart, our wound chart, our save chart. At the moment, we don't really care about this one, but I'm just including it for completeness. So if we fill out our table, so on saves, 2 ups are successes. I'm sorry, 1 is a success. Everything else is a failure. Yeah? So that means that we're going to get 1/6 of our saves through. For the wound roll,
we're going to get 1/6 of our attacks through.
Well, 1/6 of our 1/6 of our attacks make it through the save gate.
Fair.
Yeah. So for our wound roll, wounding on 3s, so nothing for 1s and 2s, but then the other ones give us 1. The question is, what do we do for our devastating wounds? Right?
Well, I guess it must have to be the inverse.
Well, check out what this says.
If
you have 1/6 of your saves going through, this tells you that for every 6 save rolls, you get 1 success.
So that means your 6 on the wound is effectively 6 dice making it to the save.
That's exactly the point. So your devastating wound is the equivalent of getting 6 dice through to the save roll. So the easy way to find that is we're just going to take the reciprocal of this. And the reciprocal of 1/6 is just 6 over 1, or 6, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then we're going to plug in for our wound roll. Our critical wound is worth 6 wounds.
Okay.
So now when we total this up, our wounds are equivalent to 9/6. It's like for every 6 wound rolls, you get 9 equivalents through.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. And then since you've accounted for the devastating wounds here in the wound table, you don't have to worry about it in the save table anymore.
Okay. Yeah, because you're effectively telling it in order to rather than push through the save, you're like, let's just give it the equivalent number of dice that should produce the same result.
Precisely, which is why we're working backwards, because anytime you skip a roll, you want to look at the next table to see what is the equivalent.
Mm-hmm. This way, if we work backwards, we already have the necessary information to do so. Yeah. Now, if this were a 2 damage weapon, like, would you be changing your 1 at the bottom as a 2 to a 2, and then would that make us 1/3?
No, if this is a 2 damage weapon, I would just multiply by 2 at the end.
So effectively, we're calculating number of attacks that succeed, not damage.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
You got it. Because when we're doing the sequence, you multiply by the attacks first and the number of damage at the end.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. You got it.
Interesting.
And then, of course, if you have the anti keyword and that applies, like if this was I don't know if this is a vehicle, anti-vehicle 3-up, well, then that just means everything that was a 3 will get that same value.
Wow. So that'd be 24/6 that make it through your wound roll. So your wound.
Yeah, that's why when you have both the anti keyword and the devastating wounds keyword,
like, it just gets crazy.
It just gets absolutely crazy very fast. You got it. Perfect.
Interesting.
All right. So when we're looking at the hit roll, we're almost through these rules now. When we're looking at the hit roll, don't forget to talk about your stealth and your hit modifiers, because you might end up with a plus or minus 1. I'm assuming y'all can do that. For Torrent allows you to skip the hit roll. So you have 2 options there. You can just make the proportionate hits that go through 1, or you can just skip it. It's completely up to you. So essentially just 1 for hit proportion.
And then once you end up at the end, because then at the very end, you're going to have a multiple of, if you only have 1 hit proportion of 1 going through, you haven't accounted for the uncertainty of how many attacks you have yet, right?
Well, that's going to be dealt with in the number of attacks. Because remember, our sequence is number of attacks times the hit proportion times the wound proportion.
Right. Okay, that's right.
Yeah, so we don't have to worry about that yet.
Or we already took care of it. If we're moving from left to right.
Well, if we're moving from right to left, then we will be deal with that later. And then again, for rerolls, just remember our equation for figuring out what your expectation value for that is going to be, or what your proportion is going to be for that. I guess it should be a P then. It's just the original odds times 6 plus the number of faces divided by 6. As we talked about in when we were looking at wound rolls. So wound rolls or re-rolls for hits and wounds act exactly the same way. You can use this exact same equation.
And that's where N is the number of dice faces that provide you with a re-roll.
Yeah, number of faces re-rolling.
Cool. If it's re-rolling 1s, it's a 1. If it's re-roll alls, then it's effectively the complement of your hit weapon skill.
Yeah. Sustained is actually pretty easy to deal with. So if you have sustained X, that just means add X to the critical value. So let's say we had like sustained 2.
Then on our hit roll, our 6 is a 3.
Exactly. So like if we were hitting on, hit on 4s, then your hit table is going to look like this. Nothing, 1, 1, and then this value here, we're going to add 2 to it. So yeah, as you mentioned, we'd get 3 there.
Which means 5/6.
5/6. Gosh darn it. Yeah, 5/6. Perfect.
Got it.
All right. The one that's a little more difficult to deal with is lethals, but lethals end up working exactly the same as devastating wounds. So we're just going to figure out what's the equivalent number of hits through. So look for the equivalent number of hits. So let's just do a really quick example again. Let's say that we hit on, give me a number.
We hit on 5s.
All right, we hit on 5s. What do we wound on?
We're wounding on 5s.
All right, and we wound on 5s. So let's go ahead and take a look at our tables. Again, I'm going to go ahead and make 3, even though now we don't actually care about the save one. So here's hit, here's wound. We're wounding on 5s, so 5s and 6 are successes. The others are not. And we would have already done this. So this is 2/6, or if you prefer, a 1/3, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then for our hit roll, hitting on 5s, nothing, 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 nothing. 5 is 1 hit. And then what is our crit going to be worth?
Well, our crit is effectively needs to get 2 of them getting through, so it'd be 3.
Exactly.
So it'd be the inverse. Not, I said the complement earlier. I meant the inverse.
Yeah, it's the reciprocal. So because for every 3 wound rolls you get 1 through, that means you effectively need 3 wound rolls to be the equivalent of that lethal hit.
Right.
So we just take the reciprocal of this, which is just 3. So this critical value is worth 3.
Which means we are hitting 4/6 of the time, even though our weapon skill is 5.
You got it.
Interesting.
Perfect. All right. And then, of course, conversion critical hits. This works exactly like the anti-keyword did before. If we had critical hits on 5s, then this would be a 3 also.
Gotcha.
If we had critical hits on 4, even if our weapon skill was 5, this would also be a 3.
Interesting.
Which is kind of interesting. Yeah. Excellent. All right. So now we can finally put this all together. So if you calculate just the hit, wound, and save roll together, and multiply that by the damage and feel no pain, that gives you the amount of damage per attack. So then we're just going to multiply by the number of attacks to get the expected damage. So now I think it's more complicated example time. I just wanted to take a moment to thank our patrons because they make our jobs so much easier. And honestly, it's so much fun chatting with them in the Discord. So thank you for all of your support. You make this work possible.
Yeah, old man hands.
Sexy biatch.
Okay, so now we're going to get real crazy?
Yeah. Well, actually, this one's going to get medium crazy.
Medium crazy. This is not yet the...
So let's say we're shooting a Forge Fiend's ectoplasma incinerators into a Falcon grav tank that's in cover, which is something that recently happened to us.
Incinerator!
All right, so we got...
Oh, you actually... Oh, this is great, because I
want
literally
to know from the battle we just had.
This is great. Okay. Tell me how big a mistake I made.
Okay. So we got 3d3 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, saving on 5s, damage 3, and it's using its datasheet ability and Dark Pacts, which gives it devastating wounds, which affects our wounds, and either lethals or sustained, which we're going to figure out which one we care about, but that's going to apply to our hit roll.
Well, if this is an open-ended question for which you don't have a slide with the final correct answer, I will point out that in that moment, I was next to my Hellbrute, which meant I got both.
That's true. But I feel like that makes it more complicated. We're going to save the more complicated thing for the next
Okay,
example.
then you're not going to tell me crap about what I did. I'm just going to know I would have done more betterer.
That's right. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. So first of all, we have 3d3 attacks. How many attacks does that give us on average?
6?
Yeah, because d3 is an average of 2. So this is 6 attacks. All right, so we got 6. We're going to make our tables.
So I also don't have a Warpsmith in here because I had the Warpsmith giving it +1.
Look, we can make these examples
Actually, no, I had to
want.
shoot through the weird fog. It was -1 on, so the 3s was accurate because the stupid fog. I'm just curious.
I know. All right, and then the damage is 3. So we're going to have a 3 over here, right? All right, hits, wounds, saves. And again, we're going to do this in reverse. Huh?
I'm just confirming real quick that the damage is 3. You looked it up, right?
This isn't about our game.
Well, it is important.
The damage is 3, yes.
Okay. This was not me trying.
Okay. All right, back to the example. Put your phone down.
No.
I feel like I'm in my classroom again.
Nope, I'm not putting my phone down because I'm busy filming you for extra footage, you butthead.
Excellent. All right, so we're saving on 5s. They're saving on 5s, which means 5 and a 6 gets us nothing. 1, 2, 3, and 4 is equivalent to 1.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be 4/6.
4/6.
4/6, get through the save roll, or if you prefer, that's 2/3.
Nice.
For our wound roll, we are wounding on 3s. So nothing, 1, 1, 1. And then we have devastating wounds. So what do we deal with it? Or what are we going to get for this critical wound here?
Well, normally it would be the inversion, right?
Exactly.
So
if we take
halves?
the inverse of 2/3 is 3 halves, or 1.5.
Okay.
So this is worth 1.5.
Okay.
Cool. So this gives us 4.5 out of 6. By the way, your math teachers might have told you that you're not supposed to put decimals in fractions. They're full of shit. There's no reason you can't have a decimal in a fraction.
Make it 9/12. It's 3/4.
Actually, this ends up being 3/4. Yeah. Again, if you want to keep these values, there's no reason you have to simplify using this method. You can totally ignore simplifying.
Yeah,
and it works just as well.
Yeah, that's an aesthetic decision.
All right. And then we're hitting on 3s. So nothing for 1s and 2s. 1, 1, 1. And then we have to figure out what goes up here.
Yeah, so on 6s, what's the special? Oh, or on this one, we're deciding for lethals or sustained?
Right. So for fun, if it was sustained, what would this be?
Then it would be 2.
Right, because it was, I guess I should have said sustained 1.
Yeah.
So this would give us 2 for that value.
Mm-hmm.
Lethals, on the other hand, is going to be the reciprocal of this, right?
Which is 4/3.
4/3.
Which is 1 1/3.
1 1/3. So then which one should we go for?
Definitely sustained.
You got it. Definitely sustained.
Because that gives us 2 as opposed to the 1.3.
Right, which gives us 5, 6 in total.
Okay.
Also, just like a really fun, quick rule.
If this number is greater than half,
you're always going to go for sustained.
That makes sense.
If it's less than half,
you're always going to go with lethals.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now that we've gotten all of our fractions for all of these different gates, all we have to do is just multiply them together. So it's just 6 times 5, 6 times 3/4 times 2/3 times 3.
Oh. So now you would like my calculator.
Yeah, so now I would like your calculator.
Okay. So what do you got?
All right, so if we're doing these in order, again, you can multiply these however you want, but 6 times 5.
6 times 5.
Divided by 6.
Divided by 6.
Times 3.
Times 3.
Divided by 4.
Divided by 4.
Times 2.
Times 2.
Divided by 3.
Divided by 3.
Times 3.
Times 3.
There you go.
7.5.
7.5 damage is what you expect to get.
Let's put this through again one more time just to make sure I didn't type the wrong thing. 6.
All right, let's do it the other way now. 6 times 5.
Times 5.
Times 3.
Times 3.
Times 2.
Times 2.
Times 3.
Times 3.
Divided by 6.
Divided by 6.
Divided by 4.
Divided by 4.
Divided by 3.
Divided by 3. 7.5. Okay.
Perfect.
Wow. Okay. So 7.5 is the number of attacks that we got through.
This is the number of damage that you expect to get.
Because it's a 1 damage weapon?
Because you already multiplied by the 3 damage.
Oh, gotcha. That was what the 3 was. Follow me.
So again, if you had just multiplied this portion together, that would give you the average. That would give you the proportion of attacks that make it through the gates.
That makes sense. This is the probability of a successful attack.
Yes, you got it. All right, so I wanted to kick this into over mode. Over mode?
Over mode!
I don't know what over mode is.
I know
Overdrive,
exactly what it is.
So let's imagine we have the absolute craziest case. This is way crazier than anything I've ever encountered.
In German, over is Uber.
Uber.
So you could be Uber mode.
Yes, into Uber mode.
Uber mode, I think, is very appropriate.
So let's make this crazy thing up. Let's say we have 10 attacks with a weapon that hits on 2s, with sustained and lethals and rerolls 1s to hit.
Okay, is this the one? Okay, the boss level
this
example.
is the boss level example. I've never seen one this complicated, but just in case.
Godzilla music.
Wounds on 5s with twin linked and devastating wounds.
Okay.
Well, let's assume that our target saves on 4s, and the damage of this weapon is d6 plus 2.
Okay, so I'm curious, as a math teacher, if you would put something like this on the quiz, is this the one that would have been extra credit at the end, or is this the one that would have been for base credit?
My philosophy was always easy to pass, hard to get an A. This is the question you'd have to get at
To get
least
an A.
partially right in order to get an A.
This is how you get an A. Okay.
All right, so let's see here. So let's go ahead and make our tables real quick. There's our hit table. Here's our wound table. Here's our save table.
The columnar approach.
We have 10 attacks, and then in terms of average damage, we got D6 plus 2. What's that going to be?
D6 plus 2 attacks, 3.5, 4.5, 5.5.
D6 plus 2 damage.
3.5 plus 2 is 5.5.
You got it. So our average damage is going to be 5.5.
So our first and last term are pretty easy to determine. Determine.
And now let's go ahead and again work backwards. So our target is saving on 4s.
Okay.
So 4, 5s, and 6s get us nothing. The others get us 1.
Got it. So that means we're saving. That's a 0.5 is our term for
You got
save.
it. So 3 6, or if you prefer, 1/2.
Cool.
And then if we do our wound roll, wounding on 5s. So nothing, 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 nothing. That's a 1. And then we have, what's our devastating wounds?
Okay.
So what's our critical wound going to be worth?
A critical wound is going to be worth 2 attacks.
Yeah.
Because normally it would take 2 attacks to get 1 to go through, but since this auto goes through, it's effectively worth 2.
You got it. So we take the reciprocal here. That goes right here.
Cool.
Okay.
But it's also twin linked, so you're re-rolling those.
Right. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take our original value. So what's our proportion right now?
Half.
Half. Or I'm just going to call it 3. Yeah, okay. We'll just call it half. 3/6.
3/6.
And then we're going to multiply it by 6 plus the number of faces you're re-rolling.
4 of them.
Yep. 6th. So it's going to be 10/6.
Okay.
So again, you could do this now or you could do it later. Let's just really quickly, let's see. 6 plus 4 is 10.
Mm-hmm.
Times 3, that's 30 over 36. I'm going to say let's not even bother simplifying it. I know the other math teachers are going to hate me for this, but fuck it.
I mean,
Screw
we could
it.
just call it 5/6.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's
All right,
fine.
And then for our hit roll, hitting on 2s with sustained, lethals, and rerolls 1 to hit. So nothing, 1, 1, 1, 1. Now what's our critical value going to be?
So it would be 6/5.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I guess we did have to reduce this. This is 5/6, and the reciprocal of that is going to be 6/5, or if you prefer, 1.2, right? All right. So this would be 1.2, but we also have sustained. How do we deal with that?
We're going to add 1 to it also.
Yeah. So it's going to be 2.2.
2.2.
Cool. There you
So
go.
now we have 6.2 over 6. I hate that.
I know. And then we're going to multiply it. Now we're going to deal with our re-rolls, right?
Mm-hmm. So you're
it's just
re-rolling
6 plus the number of faces you're re-rolling.
1.
Yup. Over 6. There you go.
Okay,
And
7/6.
That's 7/6. You got it. So I'm just going to go ahead and make this 6.26 times 7/6. And again, you could take the time to multiply that out individually if you wanted to, but there's not really a reason to. So to get the total damage output, it's just 10 times this mean thing times that mean thing times 1/2 times 5.5.
Okay, should we figure it out real quick?
Let's figure it out.
All right, hit me.
All right, 10
10
times 6.2
times 6.2
divided by 6
divided by 6
times 7
times 7
divided by 6
divided by 6
times 30
times 30
divided by 36
divided by 36
times 1
times 1
divided by 2
divided by 2
times 5.5.
times 5.5. We have 27.6.
27.6 damage in this really crazy case.
Yeah, okay. This was entirely hypothetical, but who is our boss level? What is something that's...
Nothing has all of this.
No, not the attacking. I assume it's attacking the boss. I assume the boss is receiving it. It's wounding on 5. We don't even know the strength. It's an impossible thing to do.
No, I just made this up.
Full arbitrary. Yeah,
completely arbitrary.
It's the
I just wanted to
Avatar.
show that even if you have lethals and devastating wounds and re-rolling stuff, like this accounts for all of it.
Right.
You don't have to worry about anything else. Once you've calculated these, multiply them together, you're good. You're done.
That is pretty simple. That is a goot little system you have there.
I will say, in simpler cases where I might only have a couple of special rules, I can frequently do this in my head. I would definitely need scratch paper for this problem. So oftentimes you need some scratch paper or just something to write down the fractions.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a calculator.
And a quackulator or a brother.
Or a brother. With all that in mind, I did want to address fishing really quick. Fishing is the one thing that's a little bit weird because, for instance, in this case, you had twin linked and devastating wounds. So the question is it worth it to fish on the wound roll? But here's the thing. Remember when we made this when we got this fraction, so 5 out of 6 go through. In other words, for every 6 wound rolls, you get 5 wound equivalents through, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if this number is bigger than 1, you want to fish. If this number is less than 1, you don't. Because every value you re-roll in here, essentially, it's like this turns into a 5-6, and this turns into a 5-6, and this turns into a 5-6. Mm-hmm. You don't want to replace your 1 with a 5-6. You're going to get a lower value.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So if your proportion is bigger than 1, then you fish. If not, don't fish.
So in this case, because our hit total is 7/6, or no, 6.2 times 6 plus 1.
Oh, yeah. Well, our proportion here was 6.2 out of 6.
Times 7/6, which means you should fish if you have reroll hits, which we don't. I don't think you put that in there. But
reroll 1s to hit. That's why. Yeah. But if we had reroll hits, we would absolutely. But you want to check before the rerolls. Oh, damn it. Yeah, because before the rerolls, this is actually the number you want to check, not this one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because you want to know, because this is what you get.
5-6 is what you would have gotten with the rerolls.
With the rerolls.
So 3-6, you really should not.
Yeah, do not fish with this. That's not gonna work out.
That makes sense.
But here, if you did have rerolls, our original proportion would be 6.2 out of 6.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you would totally fish here if you had rerolls.
Not super likely to help, but it might.
Well, it'll help a little bit because it'll give you an extra 0.2 out of 6. That's a small number, but
that's what I'm saying. It's not a huge buff.
1/30th increase. So like 3.3% increase if you fish.
We can agree it's minimal.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. But if you did want to fish, this is actually the only annoying one, I think, where you actually do end up with an addition, and you're probably going to calculate that early. So let's say that we had...
Do you mean you're about to come up with another circumstance?
Well, yeah, just really quickly, I just want to show you how you deal with fishing. Like, Let's say you hit on, 3s, and you have lethals, and maybe you're only wounding on 6s. What? Okie dokie.
It's fine.
Okay. So if we're hitting on 3s, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1. Oh, should have worked right to left because now I don't know what goes in here. Wounding on 6s. So 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. So this is 1/6. So the lethals would be worth 6, right? Because the reciprocal of this is 6. So our proportion here, before we consider the rerolls that we have access to, are 9/6. Mm-hmm. And because it's bigger than 1, you want to fish for this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we fish, what we're going to do is we're going to say, all right, so we have this result, which is 6, 1/6 of the time. And then 5/6 of the time, the rest of the time, all of these rerolls are going to give you what that original proportion was. So this is the only case where you don't really have any option. You have to deal with the addition. So we're going to multiply these out to figure out what the hit proportion is going to be with fishing.
It looks like you said, so 1/6 of the time you end up doing 6 damage.
Or you get 6 equivalent hits.
And 5/6 of the time you don't get 9/6.
Yes, you do. Because basically it's 1/6 of the time you just definitely get the 6. 5/6 of the time you just get to re-roll this thing all over again.
You're saying with the reroll. Yeah.
You get 9/6. So This is essentially crits, and this term is rerolls.
Right.
Which is annoying. So what would this be? 1/6 times 6, that's 1. And then this is going to be, what, 45/36? So what's 45 divided by 36?
Like 1.25. Let me see here. 45 divided by 36. 1.25.
Plus 1. So this would end up being 2.25. So in this case, with rerolls, every hit you put in gets you 2.25 hits out.
Why did you give it plus 1?
Oh, because of this.
Oh, you were saying that whole thing.
Yeah, so this whole thing is now the proportion of your hits that go through.
Okay.
2.25.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's how you deal with fishing. This is the one kind of annoying case. But the most important thing is knowing when to fish and when not to fish. Because what was this without fishing? Without fishing, this would have been 1.5. So there's a significant benefit here, mostly because you're only wounding on 6s here.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. You really need it there.
All right. So some takeaways. Lethals are better against things with higher toughness. And whenever you use lethal hits, you actually reduce the variance, reduce the spread in your attacks. So lethals actually makes your attacks more consistent. You want to use sustained against things with lower toughness, ideally. But sustained also increases your variance. So I thought that was an interesting difference between sustained and lethals. Also, as somebody else pointed out, that usually tells me that if I were wounding on 4s, these two things would be equivalent. If I go with lethals, I get a more consistent answer. If I go with sustained, I get a bigger spread. So what that means for me is that if I expect to kill it, I'm going with lethals. If I don't expect to kill it, I'm going with sustained in hopes of swinging high.
Spike. Okay, I feel that. That's actually a good point.
Yeah. The other interesting point is that because sustained essentially just gives you 1 extra hit equivalent, sustained hits is equivalent to +1 to hit. They give you exactly the same buff. Yeah. Rerolls give you a better proportional increase if the gate is harder. So if you're only hitting on 6s, rerolling hits is freaking awesome. If you're hitting on 2s, rerolling hits is still good, but less awesome. Right? Every value that you roll gives you a 16.6% increase in output, and that compounds between gates. So if you get to reroll 1s to hit and reroll 1s to wound, that's actually a 16% increase and then another 16% increase.
So it's not just a flat 32, because that second 16% effectively applies to 116%.
Exactly. But the other thing that's important about that is if you end up with a 16% buff in your hit roll, all of these things are multiplied together. So a 16% buff in your hit roll also equates to a 16% increase in your ultimate damage output.
Right.
So whatever proportion you're able to apply to any one of those gates applies to the entire number. So especially if you're able to manipulate multiple of them, they compound and it can get crazy. Right.
Interesting.
Plus and minus 1 to hit matter way more when the chance of passing that gate is low. So, for instance, whenever I apply -1 to hit to your orcs, it super sucks because you go from hitting on 5s to hitting on 6s.
Yes.
But if I apply -1 to hit to a Space Marine, they go from 3 to 4, which is only a 25% decrease instead of a 50% decrease.
Right.
Yeah. And the other thing that I notice is that as I see people play, people overfish like crazy. Every single time I feel like people get sustained or lethals, I feel like the go-to is, well, just fish for it. I feel like people really overuse that. So what you need to do...
Doesn't that mean that people are just optimists? I'm for it.
They just want to beat the odds.
Yeah.
The point that I'm trying to make, though, is check the odds. Right?
I know.
So if your hit proportion before the reroll is bigger than 1, then that means every time you roll a dice, you're going to get extra out of it, right? So check that number.
Each dice is worth 9/6. So
yeah,
a 1 could be replaced with a 9/6, which means your 1 is worth it.
So if your proportion of going through that gate without the reroll is bigger than 1, fish. If it's not, don't fish.
Yeah.
All right, that's pretty much it. So I really hope you found that useful. I really, really like doing this kind of stuff.
I'm
really glad I got to explain the math.
Can I make a request? Can we make like a cheat sheet for this? Because we had a couple equations in there and some things that I feel like I'd like to reference and practice.
Yeah, you know what? I like that idea. I'll tell you what. If you join our Patreon, even at the free level, you get access to the cheat sheet I'm going to make for this. So please enjoy.
Cool. Maybe we'll even throw on a little instructional video for those that just want to see a layman try it.
Yeah, we'll have Dane try some of these out, and I'll tutor him.
That sounds great. I would love that. Cool. All right, let's do it. That sounds great.
All right, bro. Let's finally go finish that Warhammer game, shall we?
Yeah, I'm gonna smish you.
Bye, Warp Fiends. I'm gonna go kill Chaos guys. Bye.
Thank you for watching another episode of WarpHammer Math.
For the Emperor!